Edgewood University. Year 1. Episode 12. New Feeling. A connection can be made in the stars without two people knowing about each other. Layla smiled at Connor, walking toward him, and he grinned, gesturing to the chair next to him. Bailey sat next to Alex, Cassidy sat next to Cody, and Faith sat next to her brother. "Hi," said Layla, sitting beside Connor opposite Faith. Connor looked in a daze, and his sister snapped her fingers. "Connor," she said, and Connor shook his head. He glanced at his sister and looked at Layla. "Hi. Thanks for not mauling me when I woke you. I heard you can be a real bear in the morning." She teased, and Connor smiled shyly. "I thought I did," he said, leaning into her ear, and Layla blushed. "So, who told you I was a bear, besides yours truly?" Layla pressed her lips together, glancing at Faith, and Faith threw a piece of cereal at her. "Street rules. What's said in the sweet stays in the sweet. You're sleeping with the enemy," she said, and Layla's mouth dropped open. Connor chuckled, pulling his chair closer and putting his arm on the back of Layla's chair. Layla looked at him and he looked into her eyes. "Trust me, I wanted to," he whispered, and she felt goosebumps on her arms. "Wow. My brother has learned patience," snickered Faith, and Connor rolled his eyes. "My sister, the one who always makes me look like the bad guy." Faith shook her head and pointed her fork at her brother. "No, you do that all on your own, bruh." Connor scoffed, and Alex chuckled. Connor made a face and looked at Layla. "So, what is it that you were trying to tell me this morning?" he asked, and she grinned. She pulled a sketchbook from her backpack, moved her tray, and set it on the table. "I think our connection started a long time ago. I was diagnosed with a type of sleep apnea where I sketch in my sleep. Look at these. I've been sketching you for a long time." Connor looked through the sketchbook and was impressed by how detailed the drawings were. Strangely, there was a sketch of him with the claw marks on his face, and he touched his face. Layla thought he was uncomfortable inside. "Sorry," she said, turning the page, but he stopped her. He flipped the page back and pointed to the date. "Look, you drew this a year before it happened," he said, and Layla scooted closer. She craned her neck to get a better look, and her sweet scent invaded his nose. He closed his eyes and resisted the urge to take her back to his room. Bailey looked at him with glowing eyes and chuckled. "Are you all right? Your emotions are everywhere," she said, digging into her eggs, and Alex snickered. Connor looked at him with crimson eyes, and Alex stopped laughing. "Mind fairies," he growled softly, and Layla giggled. She leaned closer, pointing to the picture, and bit her lower lip. "Put your lips on my shoulder if you have to. That worked this morning," she whispered, and he looked at her. Layla smiled, flipping through the pages of her sketchbook, and Connor rested his chin on her bare shoulder. "Say, there's another one. The day we bonded," she said, and Connor looked at the picture. He noticed something in the background in the woods and pointed, pressing his lips to her shoulder. "What's that?" Layla looked and picked up the paper. A dark figure in the woods held a wooden box with 4 different colored balls: silver, orange, yellow, and blue. "I don't know. I drew these when I was sleeping," she said, noticing Tyler walking into the room and standing in line. She put her sketches in order, shoved them in the book, and put the book in her backpack. Connor moved his head, but she grabbed his shirt, and he rested his chin on her shoulder. "I'll show you more later," she whispered, and he nodded, rubbing his thumb on her arm. Tyler smiled, walked toward them, and sat between Alex and Faith. "Hey, guys," he said, and Layla smiled. "Hey, man, long time no see," said Cody, and Tyler shrugged. "Who knew becoming an alpha could be so time-consuming? Don't forget you have to be there at noon," he said, and Cody nodded. Layla looked at her best friend, and Tyler gave her a dashing smile. She could never stay mad at him, and he could never stay mad at her. They made a pact when they were 6. No matter what happened between them, they would always find a way to work it out. Layla crawled on Connor's lap and leaned behind Faith. Connor looked at his sister, and she snorted. Tyler looked at Layla, and she bit her bottom lip. "Friends?" she asked, raising her eyebrows, and his heart melted. "Friends," Layla crawled off Connor's lap, walked toward him, and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. He laughed, hugging her back, and Connor chuckled. Tyler and Layla looked at each other, smiled, and he kissed the side of her mouth. "Love you?" "Love you." Layla messed his hair, sat beside Connor, and leaned against him. He put his arm around her, and Bailey gave Tyler a thoughtful look. "So, we really don't have to go to the barracks, do we?" she asked, and he nodded. "My mother wants us to train together. Something about a great evil headed this way, and we're stronger with 3 alphas. He explained, and Connor scoffed. Cassidy bit a strawberry and gave Tyler a questioning look. "What kind of evil?" she asked, and he shrugged. "I'm sure whatever it is, we can handle it. It's always good to be ready when it does come. 3 classes begin in 15 minutes. Announced the loudspeaker. Tyler got up from the table and looked at his friends. "See you guys this afternoon," he said. Cody stood and touched Cassidy's arm. "See you soon," he said, and she nodded. Cody and Tyler walked away, and Alex snickered. "That wasn't awkward at all," said Bailey, and everyone chuckled. "Next time, just focus on me and Connor," said Layla, and Bailey grinned, gathering her things. Connor rubbed Layla's back, rested his hand on the nape of her neck, and leaned into her ear. "Heard her when we talk. Just you and me," he whispered, and she looked at him thoughtfully. "Why do you want to get me alone so badly?" She teased and heard a low growl rumble in his chest. "Heal," she whispered with big eyes, and he ran his tongue over his teeth. She raised an eyebrow, and he grinned, looking at the table. "All right," he said softly, looking at her. "But just so you know, that's not going to work forever," he added, and Layla smirked, biting her lip. "So, what you're saying is one of these days, the wild animal inside you is going to come out and maul me?" Connor grinned with glowing eyes and pressed his lips to her ear. "Maul, maim, ravish until I unleash the animal inside you, and then it's game on, sweetheart," he whispered, nipping the side of her ear, and power rushed through her body, making her eyes glow. Layla pulled back and searched his gold eyes. "What do they say about dogs and new tricks?" she asked, grabbing his hands. Connor looked at her suspiciously and leaned back. "You can't teach an old dog new tricks," said Faith. "Well, I can see into the future, and I'm about to prove that theory wrong," said Layla, pressing her thumbs into Connor's palms. An intense calm washed over him, and he exhaled slowly and closed his eyes. He felt completely relaxed, and it was a new feeling for him. He felt human, and there was no fear of hurting someone or losing control. He blew a long breath and enjoyed the feeling. Leaf looked at her brother oddly, and at Layla. "What are you doing to him?" she asked, and Layla smiled. "Teaching an old dog new tricks?" Faith, Alex, Cassidy, and Bailey laughed, and Connor opened his eyes. Surprisingly, his eyes were brown, and Layla grinned as she removed her thumbs, and his eyes turned back to gold. "Thank you," he breathed, searching her eyes, and she grinned shyly. "Anytime." The bell rang, and Layla, Connor, Alex, and Faith covered their ears, and Bailey snickered. "Come on, guys. Quit being so dramatic. It's just the bell to get to class," she said, and Cassidy gave her a thoughtful look. "It rattled my brain," said Alex, holding his temple, and Connor agreed. Faith and Layla looked at each other and made uncomfortable faces. "Werewolves and Hellcats have sensitive hearing," said Cassidy, and Bailey chuckled. "Oh yeah. Sorry, guys," she said, and Alex tickled her chin. They grabbed their things and headed out of the dining hall. Connor touched Layla's face, and she looked at him. "See you later," he said, and he, Faith, and Alex rushed off to their first class. Layla, Faith, Bailey, and Cassidy waved and ran toward the stone circle. The stone circle is the strongest point of magic in Edgewood. Feel it, grasp it, and become one with it. Now, dig deep and pull that power to the surface, instructed Maya. Layla, Bailey, and Cassidy stood in front of tall stone structures and put their hands out. Tiny, white lightning zapped between Cassidy's hands, and Maya smiled proudly as the girl's hair turned black with white streaks. Cassidy glanced at the headmistress, and Maya nodded. Cassidy inhaled a deep breath and screamed. Layla winced, covered her ears, and tried to block out the ear-piercing shriek. The cauldron in the center lit up with white magic, and Maya nodded. Cassidy put her hands down and breathed heavily, and Bailey grinned proudly. Good job. The Banshee can call upon the air element to give her power strength. Even though Banshees are known as harbingers of death, they can also use their powers for good, said Maya, and Cassidy smiled. The headmistress looked at Bailey and nodded. Bailey stared at the center of her hands as her eyes glowed purple, and a purple ball appeared in the center of the cauldron. The air between her hands swirled and turned purple, and she smiled. Mind fairies. They can feel others' emotions, protect the minds of combatants, and they can call on the element of space. Bailey blew a breath, lowering her hands, and Maya looked at Layla. She nodded, took a deep breath, and felt the land's magic rush through her veins. Ribbons of fire magic emerged from the ground and swirled around her arms and legs. Her eyes started glowing crimson, and flames shot into the cauldron. Everyone watched in shock as the flaming dragon wings appeared, wrapping around Layla, and she phased into the Black Panther. She looked at Maya with crimson eyes, flapped her wings, and roared into the sky. Maya's hands flew to her mouth. She had never seen a Hellcat as beautiful or as close before. She smiled, and tears filled her eyes. "The mistress, what is she?" asked a female student, and Maya straightened. "She is the Alpha Hellcat Dragon Spark, the first of her kind to arise in centuries," she explained. Bailey laughed, kneeling and holding out her hand. Layla looked at her with crimson eyes, and Bailey's eyes turned purple. The panther walked toward her and headbutted her hand. Bailey ran her hand over the panther's soft fur, and Layla purred. Cassidy smiled with tears, and the class watched in awe. The Hellcat walked back to her spot, turned in a circle, and Layla phased into her human form. The flaming wings disappeared, and she grinned, seeing the class stare at her. Maya walked toward her, placed her hands on her shoulders, and searched her eyes. "Layla, I'm sorry I ever doubted you. Maybe Peter wasn't wrong when he chose you. You bring balance to the Hellhound's fire, and Connor brings peace and security to the Hellcat. I see now why Tyler wasn't chosen. I'm sorry we ever hurt you." Maya took Layla's hands, and Layla winced. "You know, I bonded with Connor." She smiled, nodded, and touched her face. "It's okay. You weren't meant to bond with Tyler. However, you two are still just as close, and I wouldn't have it any other way." Layla gave the woman a clever look and squeezed her hands. "Maya, Tyler and I already have a bond, a human one that will never change," she said, and Maya giggled. "You two have always been inseparable, but I am still surprised it was Connor Lancer. Are you sure? He's a very large young man and can be quite scary at times," she asked, and Layla laughed. "He's not a bad guy, and the Hellcat does pick an alpha of an outside pack," stated Layla, and Maya looked at her thoughtfully. "True, but the werewolf, the Alpha Hellcat, Dragon Spark seeks the Alpha Silverback Spark. I wonder if the Silverback is dormant in the Lancer genes. That means Connor might be the Spark." Layla's eyes widened, and Maya gave her a knowing look. "Then it's my turn to show him. After school, I'll take him to the Shimmering Tree. The fairies can help unlock the spark if it's him," Layla suggested. "Maybe. But how are you going to get him alone? Alex and Cody follow him around like lost puppies." Layla laughed and gave Tyler's mother a clever look. "I think I can convince him with little effort," she said, and Maya laughed. "Just be careful. The Silverback can easily lose control and hurt you." "Connor wouldn't hurt me," said Layla quickly, and Maya searched her eyes. "I hope you're right." Layla nodded and smirked. "What?" asked Maya, eyeing her suspiciously, and Layla bit her lower lip. "About the barracks?" The headmistress laughed and shook her head. "Yes, you still have to go. Maybe it will teach you all to get along." "This is cruel and unwanted punishment. Only two of the pack have a problem with each other. Put them in a wrestling ring and let them fight it out." Bailey and Cassidy grinned at Layla for admitting they were a pack, and Layla made a face. Maya wrapped an arm around Layla's shoulder and rubbed her arm. "No exceptions, my wanted daughter. Now I have a class to finish teaching," said Maya, smacking her in the arm with her fan, and the girls laughed.